So at first come to the atypical ribs. So which ribs are the atypical ribs? We already told you. The number 1, that means first, second, 10, 11th and 12th. These ribs are atypical ribs because each ribs have some special characteristics, and by this we can distinguish from the typical and atypical. Okay, so at first come with the first rib. Okay, so this is a picture of a first rib. So what are the distinguishing features, or what are the special characteristics that the first rib has? Number 1, it is shortest, broadest and most acutely curved, and it is flattened from above downwards, so that it has upper surface, lower surface and outer border, inner border. Okay, but in the typical ribs we saw that there are upper and lower border and outer and inner surface, but in case of the first rib, as it is flattened from above downwards, it has upper and lower surfaces and outer and inner borders. Number 3, it has some articular facet, single circular articular facet to articulate with the side of the first thoracic vertebra. Okay, so it has single articular facet, and its angle and tubercle coincide, that means they merge with each other, and it has no costal groove. In the typical ribs we have shown that the typical ribs have costal groove in its lower border of the inner surface, but it has no costal groove in case of atypical ribs, that means in the first rib, and its anterior end is larger and thicker. So look at it, this is the picture of a typical rib. Atypical rib, there is a first rib. So you can see this is flattened from anterior posteriorly, above downwards, and it has no costal groove, no costal groove. Okay, now come to the features. So at first come to the border, inner border. Inner border, it presents a scalene tubercle about its middle, and tubercle and adjoining part of the upper surface provides attachment to the scalenus anterior muscle, and it also provides the attachment to the Simpson's fascia. So look at that. So in the inner border, at the middle part, it has a tubercle. This is known as a scalene tubercle. So the scalene tubercle, and with its adjoining surfaces, there is attachment of the scalenus anterior muscle. Okay, and there is also attachment of one fascia, that is known as Simpson's fascia. Okay, so now come to the next border, that is the outer border. The outer border, it provides origin to the first digitation of the serratus anterior about its middle. So in the outer border, there will be serratus anterior attachment, first digitation of the serratus anterior. Now come to the superior surface or upper surface. The upper surface has two shallow grooves, anterior and posterior. The anterior groove lodges the subclavian vein, but the posterior groove lodges the subclavian artery and lower trunk of the brachial plexus. And the area behind the posterior groove up to the costal tubercle, it provides attachment to the scalenus medius muscle, and in front of the anterior groove and near the anterior end provides attachment to the subclavius muscle and costoclavicular ligament. So let's see it. So in the outer border, we told you there are two groups, anterior group and posterior group. Okay, so the anterior group that lodges the subclavian vein, and the posterior group, we already saw that there is subclavian artery and lower trunk of the brachial plexus. Okay, and the area and the area in front of the anterior groove, there is attachment of the subclavius muscle and costoclavicular ligament, and the area behind the posterior groove up to the tubercle, there is attachment of the scalenus medius muscle. Okay, now come to the two surfaces, upper surface. We have already told about this upper surface. Now come to the lower surface. The lower surface is related to the costal pleura. Okay, now come to the neck. The neck is elongated and directed upward, backward and laterally, and we have to know the neck, what are the structures that are related to the neck, and it is asked in the Viva. So what are they? This is a sympathetic chain from medial to lateral. Sympathetic chain, first posterior intercostal vein, superior intercostal artery, and ventral lemmas of the first thoracic vein. We can remember in short the chain pulling the vein. So first there is chain, then pulling the vein, pulling the vein, that means vein, artery and nerve. So we will now see the relation of the neck. So this is the neck. Okay, so what are the structures that are related to the neck from medial to lateral? We learned that the sympathetic chain that pulling the vein. So at first from medial to lateral, this is the sympathetic chain, then pulling the vein, that means vein, first posterior intercostal vein, superior intercostal artery, then ventral lemmas of the thoracic, one segment of the spinal cord. Okay, so the relationship of the neck is most important and it is asked in the Viva. Now come to the, so this is up to the first rib. Now we will start the second rib, 10th rib and 11th rib and 12th rib. So from this 4 rib we have to know just the special characteristics, nothing more than that. So at first come to the second rib. Okay, the second rib, do you have a feature? Okay, so this is the feature of the second rib. Look at that, this is second rib. So what are the features of the second rib? What are the special characteristics? Number 1, the length of the second rib is twice than that of the, this would be first rib. So its length is twice than the first rib. Its shaft is curved. The shaft is not twisted. Near its middle, it provides a prominent tubercle, and this tubercle provides attachment to the serratus anterior muscle. Okay, so look at that. In the middle of the second rib, that presents a tubercle, and here there is attachment of the serratus anterior muscle. Now the next feature is the outer surface of the shaft is directed outwards and upwards, but the inner surface is directed inward and downward. And the last feature is the upper border and adjoining part of the upper surface provides attachment to the scalenus posterior muscle and serratus posterior superior muscle. So in the upper border there is scalenus posterior and serratus posterior superior muscle is attached. Okay, so we have very less features from the second ribs. Now come to the 10th rib. The 10th rib, it has a single articular facet on its head, and it articulates with the body of the corresponding thoracic vertebra, and it is slightly shorter than the typical rib. Okay, then the 11th ribs. 11th ribs is single large articular facet on its head, and it has no neck and no tubercle. But it contains a shallow costal groove, and it has also a slight angulated. And the 12th ribs. The 12th ribs is same as the 11th rib, but except it has no angle, no costal groove, but the 11th rib has a costal groove, but the 12th rib has no costal groove and it is much shorter than the 11th ribs. Okay, and this 11 and 12, they are the floating ribs. Okay, so we have to know some attachment from the 12th ribs because it is the last atypical ribs. So we have to know some muscular attachment in the outer surface. So you can see the two pictures. One is showing the outer surface. This is the inner surface. So this is outer surface and this is inner surface of the 12th rib. In the outer surface, there is attachment of the latissimus dorsi and external oblique muscle. So latissimus dorsi is attached above and external oblique is attached the below. And its medial half provides attachment to the erector spinae muscle. So this is the erector spinae muscle. And now the inner surface, there is an oblique line crossing the middle of the surface, marks the line of pleural reflection. So in the middle of the, you can see middle of the inner surface, there is an oblique line. There is the line of pleural reflection. And the lower part of the median half provides attachment to the quadratus lumborum muscle. In the lower half, in the middle part, there is attachment of the quadratus lumborum muscle. Okay. And there are some also other muscle attachment. Medial 2/4 near the upper border, there is attachment of the internal intercostal muscle. And upper part of the lateral 1/4 gives attachment to the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm. Now come to the lower border. The lower border gives attachment to the lumbocostal ligament and lateral arcuate ligament. Okay. So in the lower border, there is attachment of the lumbocostal ligament and lateral arcuate ligament. Now comes to the one clinical anatomy. This is the cervical rib. Cervical rib we discussed in the previous lecture. The cervical rib is nothing but the costal element of the C7 vertebra may elongate and form a rib that is known as cervical rib. It may be unilateral or bilateral, and it is most common found in the right side. The cervical rib have a blind tip that is connected to the first rib by fibrous band or cartilage. That means the cervical rib is connected to the first rib via some fibrous band or cartilage, and it complex the lower trunk of the brachial plexus as well as the subclavian artery. So it will produce some symptoms due to compression of the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. There will be pain along the medial side of the forearm and hand, and due to compression of the subclavian artery, there will be disturbance of the circulation. That means ischemia of the upper limb will be found. So this is the cervical rib. So what is it? In short, it is some costal elongated part of the cervical 7 vertebra. Okay, cervical 7 vertebra, and it attaches to the cervical 1 vertebra, and it comprises some plexus and some vessels. That is the lower trunk of the brachial plexus and subclavian artery. Produces some signs and symptoms. So that's all about from the ribs.